Hi, I'm Amelia. At my own birthday dinner, my sister slammed my cake to the ground and shouted, "Get down and eat." My family laughed, cheered even. I sat there, frozen, like I was the only one who didn't get the joke. But that night wasn't the beginning. It was just the first time they showed their cruelty out loud. 3 days later, they were pounding on my door, begging. So what happened between the cake and the concrete? You're about to find out. The night air in Santa Barbara carried a kind of warmth that never quite reached me. My mother's backyard glowed with string lights that wrapped around the white trellis like something out of a lifestyle magazine. I stood there holding a modest gift bag in one hand, my heels pressing softly into the manicured grass. You could smell the ocean in the distance, clean, salty, faintly bitter. I had driven 4 hours down from Los Angeles for this. My birthday dinner. My name was on the invitation, printed in gold cursive letters. But the moment I walked in, it felt like the celebration belonged to someone else. "Amelia, you made it," my mother said, her tone polished but flat. She kissed the air near my cheek and turned quickly toward a neighbor. Seraphine was already there, standing by the patio bar, a champagne flute in one hand, her other arm looped around our mother's waist. She was radiant, wearing a white silk dress that made her look like the star of an engagement party instead of a guest. People flocked around her like bees to a bloom. I hovered near the edge of the crowd, smiling when someone looked my way, nodding when they didn't. There were candles everywhere, lavender-scented, flickering against glass. My name was scribbled on a small chalkboard next to a cake that looked half forgotten, tucked behind a tray of shrimp and a bowl of salad no one had touched. The frosting was simple, white with soft blue lettering that read, "Happy Birthday, Amelia." It felt like an afterthought. As I watched, I noticed how every conversation seemed to orbit around Seraphine. Her new business venture, her engagement ring, her upcoming podcast about female empowerment. People laughed at every word she said. When I approached to greet her, she leaned in and whispered, "You look good," for someone who doesn't get out much. Then she smiled wide, turning back to her friends as if she hadn't just sliced through me with that one sentence. I tried to laugh it off, the way I always had. That was the rule in this family, smile through the sting. Keep the peace. My father used to call me the calm one. But calm is just another word for quiet when no one wants to hear you. When it came time for cake, my mother called everyone's attention. "Let's gather round. Seraphine, be a dear and light the candles." My sister swanned over to the table, flicking the lighter with a performative flourish. The flames reflected in her eyes. "You sure you want all these people to see you blow out candles?" she murmured, just loud enough for me to hear. "It's a little childish, don't you think?" I forced a smile. "It's tradition." "Sure," she said, drawing the word out. Then she raised her voice. "Everyone ready?" Someone dimmed the patio lights. The crowd started singing, off-key and too loud. I stared at the candles. 35 years old. 35 and still hoping for a moment that felt like belonging. I leaned forward to make a wish, something small, like peace, maybe, and that's when it happened. Seraphine's arm shot forward. Her perfectly manicured hand slammed into the side of the cake, sending it toppling off the table. It hit the deck with a dull thud, frosting splattering across my shoes. For a moment, everything stopped. The smell of burnt sugar and champagne hung in the air. Then Seraphine laughed, a sharp, delighted sound that sliced through the quiet. "Oops," she said, eyes glinting. "Guess I'm clumsy tonight." I bent slightly, instinctively reaching for a paper towel, but she took a step closer, voice suddenly loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh no, Amelia. Don't bother. Just get down and eat. Isn't that what you wanted? A piece of cake." Laughter erupted. At first a few uncomfortable chuckles, then full-blown hysterics. My cousin Matthew slapped his knee. My mother covered her mouth, but I saw the smile underneath. No one stopped her. No one said my name. I straightened up slowly, my hands trembling just enough to notice. I could feel my pulse behind my ears. I looked from face to face, each one familiar, each one suddenly strange. "Why?" I managed to ask, but my voice barely carried. Seraphine shrugged. "Relax, it's a joke. Don't be so sensitive." That word again. Sensitive. The family's favorite insult disguised as concern. My mother's voice drifted over. Honey, it's fine. You know your sister. She's just playful. Playful. That's what they called it when she mocked me in front of strangers. When she told my ex-boyfriend I was emotionally high maintenance. When she used the money I lent her to buy herself jewelry. I looked down at the ruined cake. The candles still flickered weakly, one of them bent and sputtering on the ground. Something inside me went still. The laughter faded, replaced by the hum of conversation moving on. Seraphine clinked glasses with someone. My mother asked if anyone wanted coffee. The world kept spinning, as if nothing had happened. I stepped back from the table, my shoes sticking slightly to the frosting on the deck. The air felt heavy, thick with perfume and smoke from the grill. I didn't say a word. There was nothing to say. I slipped through the patio door, my heart hammering. The hallway inside smelled like lemon polish and old carpet. I grabbed my purse from the counter. The faint sound of music floated in from outside, something upbeat, cruelly cheerful. As I reached for the doorknob, I heard my mother's voice again, faint through the walls. She's always been too sensitive. It's exhausting. I stood there for a moment, staring at the reflection of the backyard lights on the glass door. The girl in the reflection looked composed, almost calm, but I could see the crack forming behind her eyes. Outside, the night had cooled. I walked across the driveway, my heels clicking against the concrete, and slid into my car. The scent of frosting clung to my hands. I rubbed them against my dress, trying to erase it, but it wouldn't go away. For a long while, I didn't start the engine. I just sat there, hands on the steering wheel, watching the silhouettes of people moving behind the curtains. Their laughter rose again, muffled but sharp, the kind of sound that doesn't fade easily. My phone buzzed in my lap. A notification. Happy birthday, Amelia, from a florist I'd ordered from last year. Below, it was a draft message I'd written to myself that morning, just in case no one remembered. Happy birthday to me. Here's to small beginnings. I stared at it, thumb hovering over the screen. Then I deleted it. The house lights blurred through the windshield. I could almost hear Seraphine's voice again, echoing. Get down and eat. I turned the key in the ignition. The car came alive with a low hum. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay. As the tires rolled over the gravel, the laughter faded behind me, replaced by the steady rhythm of my heartbeat and the quiet thrum of the road ahead. I started the engine, not to go anywhere in particular, but to get away from the echo of that laughter. The headlights cut across the empty street, washing over rows of sleeping houses, their windows glowing faintly behind closed curtains. I kept both hands on the steering wheel, my fingers stiff, the smell of frosting still clinging to my skin. I told myself I was fine, that I was just tired, but the lie was too thin to hold. Santa Barbara at night has a way of feeling too quiet, the kind of silence that doesn't soothe, it presses. My apartment wasn't far, maybe 15 minutes if the lights stayed green. The city slipped by in fragments, a gas station with one car under a flickering bulb, a diner still open, a couple sitting in the corner booth leaning close over coffee. I watched them for a second too long before the light turned green again. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't want a song or a voice filling the space. I needed the silence, even if it hurt. Somewhere around the third intersection, my phone buzzed. A voicemail. I hit play on the speaker. Don't make a scene, my mother's voice said, calm but sharp as glass. It was just a joke. Grow up, Amelia. The message ended with a soft beep. I pulled over near a row of parked cars, gripping the steering wheel tighter. My throat burned, but no tears came. It wasn't new. It never was. When I finally reached my building, I sat in the car for a long time before getting out. The dashboard clock read 10:28 p.m. My apartment was on the second floor, a small one-bedroom that always smelled faintly of coffee and eucalyptus candles. I kicked off my shoes by the door and turned on the kitchen light. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound. I filled the kettle and set it on the stove. The click of the igniter echoed in the quiet. While I waited for the water to boil, I leaned against the counter and stared at the reflection of the city lights in the window. My face looked older than I remembered, or maybe just tired. The kettle began to hiss, and with it came memories, uninvited, vivid. Age 9. Seraphine breaking the porcelain vase my grandmother gave Mom. When Mom came home, she found me sitting near the shards, trying to pick them up before anyone stepped on them. "What did you do, Amelia?" she'd asked. I said, "It wasn't me." But Seraphine had already started crying, saying, "I didn't mean to, I swear." Mom's arms wrapped around her, and I spent the rest of the day in my room, listening to them watching TV downstairs. Age 14. Science fair week. I'd spent 2 months on a project about wind turbines. The night before presentation day, I found it torn apart, glue hardened, wires pulled loose. Seraphine laughed, said, "Relax, it was ugly anyway." When I cried, Mom shouted, "Stop being dramatic, Amelia." She said she's sorry. I was grounded for disrespect. Seraphine still won that year for her essay on sisterhood and empathy. Age 19. I got accepted into the state university. I remember the thrill of the acceptance letter, the promise of leaving home. Then Mom sat me down at the kitchen table. "Sweetheart," she said, "your sister's tuition came through first, and we can't afford both. You can always apply again next year." I never did. The whistle of the kettle snapped me back to the present. I poured the water into my mug, the steam rising like a ghost between me and the past. I sat on the couch, wrapping my hands around the cup. The tea tasted faintly of mint and metal. The apartment felt too neat, too controlled. Every framed photo on the wall told the same lie. Smiling faces, perfect family dinners, Christmas mornings where no one argued. I couldn't remember the last time any of it felt real. I opened my laptop on the coffee table, not sure why. Maybe habit. Maybe to distract myself. But the first thing I saw was my desktop background, me and Seraphine, 2 years ago, standing in front of our mother's house at Thanksgiving. She was leaning into me, her arm around my shoulder, her smile picture perfect. I remembered how that day ended, too, her telling me, "You should be grateful Mom still includes you." I closed the laptop and stared at the blank TV screen. My reflection looked back, small, tired, but not broken. Why do they always get away with it? I whispered. The sound of my own voice startled me. It had been a long time since I'd heard it out loud in my own apartment. I walked to the shelf and pulled down a small stack of papers, old receipts, tuition transfers, wire confirmations, loan slips. Little pieces of proof that I had always given more than I received. Mortgage help for Mom. Utility payments for Seraphine. Even a Venmo screenshot from last Christmas. "Thanks, sis. You're the best, red heart." I spread them across the table, the paper edges fluttering in the breeze from the open window. Each one felt like a memory etched into ink. I began to place them into a new folder, labeling it with a Sharpie. Proof I exist. The words looked strange, but right. I leaned back in my chair. The clock on the microwave blinked 11:16. The neighborhood outside had gone quiet. Somewhere, a dog barked once, then silence again. My phone lit up on the counter. I didn't want to look, but the preview line caught my eye. Family chat. 3 new messages. I unlocked the screen. The first one was from Seraphine. "You really embarrassed everyone tonight." Then my brother added, "Mom's upset. You could have handled it better." Finally, my mother's message. "Thanks for ruining dinner, Amelia." For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The words blurred. I put the phone face down on the counter and walked toward the balcony. The night air was cooler now. Streetlights shimmered against the pavement below, stretching long shadows like veins across the street. I let the chill fill my lungs, grounding me. I wasn't going to cry. Not again. Instead, I went back to the table, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank document on the screen. My fingers hovered above the keys. I began typing. Not for them, not for anyone else, but for me. Name, dates, transfers, conversations, every insult disguised as advice, every apology that was really a warning. By midnight, I had pages filled. My hands ached, but I felt lighter, clearer. Like each keystroke peeled back a layer of noise I'd carried too long. The clock read 12:07 a.m. when I finally stopped. I sat there in the quiet, tea gone cold beside me, papers stacked neatly in front of me. My phone buzzed again, another message lighting up the screen. I didn't even look this time. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and whispered to the empty room. Not this time. I didn't reply, but I opened my laptop and started documenting everything. Every loan, every slight, every silence. The night bled into morning before I even realized I hadn't slept. My laptop still glowed softly on the kitchen table, its fan humming like distant wind. I'd spend hours typing, every transaction, every message, every instance where I'd been the responsible one. The cursor blinked on the screen like a heartbeat refusing to stop. When the first light crept through the blinds, I made coffee strong enough to sting my tongue. The bitterness felt grounding. I pulled my hair into a bun, opened the blinds wider, and sat back down at the table. The city was waking up, car doors slamming, dogs barking, a neighbor's radio playing an old Fleetwood Mac song. But in my apartment, the silence was still absolute. I opened the Proof I Exist folder again. Bank statements, transfer logs, co-signed loan papers I hadn't touched since the day I'd signed them. Each PDF felt like a bruise that had never healed. I scrolled through page after page, the numbers blurring together until they formed a pattern, one I'd refused to see for years. Every favor had a date. Every promise had a price. There it was, a $3,200 transfer labeled car down payment. Seraphine. A week later, a $460 auto insurance payment. My name appeared at the bottom of every page, next to hers. I printed the documents one by one. The machine's rhythmic whir filled the room as I sipped my coffee. Each sheet that slid out felt like a quiet confession from the past. 3 years ago, I remembered sitting at Mom's kitchen counter when Seraphine called me out of the blue. Her voice cracked through the phone, thick with tears. "Amelia, please. I messed up. My car broke down on the freeway. They're towing it now. I can't get to work. I'll lose my job." I'd been in the middle of grading student papers then, my small tutoring gig barely covering rent, but hearing her cry twisted something in me. I told her I'd help. That night, we met at the dealership. She wore sunglasses, even though it was dark. Her mascara was smeared, her hands trembling dramatically as she signed the papers. "I swear I'll pay you back," she said, clutching my arm. "You're saving my life, sis." Mom was there too, hovering between us, her tone sweet but firm. "You're the stable one, Amelia. It makes sense that you help your sister out. Family sticks together, right?" Family sticks together. I signed the forms. My name went next to Seraphine's on the dotted line, my credit attached to her car. I told myself it was temporary. A few months, maybe. But a week later, Seraphine posted a photo from a resort in Tulum. Her caption read, "Manifesting abundance, nail polish money with wings." She tagged Mom. I wasn't mentioned. When I confronted her, she said, "Relax, it was a sponsored trip. Don't be jealous." Jealous. That word still stung. I wasn't jealous, I was tired. Now, sitting in my kitchen 3 years later, I stared at the proof on my screen. Payments deducted automatically, each one authorized by me. She hadn't paid a cent. I opened my notes app and started listing everything. Date, amount, reason, promise made, promise broken. Outside, the sunlight spread across the floor, washing over the clutter of paper and cold coffee cups. I rubbed my temple, exhaustion pressing behind my eyes, when another thought hit me. If there were documents like these, there might be messages too. Proof beyond money. I opened my iCloud, a habit I'd nearly forgotten. It took a while to load. Years of photos, shared files, forgotten folders. My chest tightened as I scrolled through old albums. Family vacations, birthdays, all those smiles that now looked rehearsed. Then I saw it. Shared folder, Family Group 2018. I didn't remember saving it. When I clicked, a set of screenshots appeared. Most were trivial, recipes, directions, memes, but one image froze me. It was a screenshot of a group chat. The header read, "Mom and Seraphine 2 hearts." I shouldn't have opened it, but I did. Seraphine, watch her pout when we don't mention her degree, face with tears of joy. Mom, that girl's always needed a reality check. The timestamp was for my graduation week. I remember that day, the silence in the crowd when my name was called, the forced smile in the photo afterward. I had thought they were proud. They'd been mocking me. My stomach knotted. I set the phone down and pressed my hands over my eyes. For a long time, I just sat there listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a car horn outside. I wasn't angry yet, just hollow. When I finally picked up the phone again, I scrolled through more of their messages. A comment about my clothes at Thanksgiving. Jokes about how I always need to be right. Little things, each one small, but together they formed a web I'd been trapped in for years. I could almost hear Mom's voice from last night. It was just a joke. Grow up, Amelia. I stood up, poured the rest of my coffee into the sink, and turned on the tap. The sound of rushing water filled the room, drowning out the noise in my head. I whispered, "No more." Back at the table, I opened a new document on my laptop. The screen glowed, white against the morning light. I began typing again, only this time it wasn't a list. It was a declaration. I am not the disposable one. I typed it once, then again. Each repetition steadied me. My fingers moved faster now, searching, calculating. I opened a browser and typed, Green First Bank Liability Removal Process. The search results filled the screen, pages of information about co-signed loans, legal rights, how to remove your name from shared debt. I clicked the first link. The moment I saw the words request consultation, I felt my pulse quicken. 4 years, I had waited for apologies that never came. I had begged for fairness in a family that only saw my usefulness. But this was something they couldn't laugh off. The cursor hovered over the button. My hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of finally choosing myself. I took a deep breath and clicked. The screen blinked once, confirming my request. The sound that escaped me wasn't quite a laugh and not quite a sob. It was something in between, a sound of release. The morning sun climbed higher, filling the kitchen with warmth. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper. I leaned back in my chair and stared out the window, watching the city stretch awake. This time, I didn't feel small. The moment I clicked request consultation, I knew there was no turning BSC. The moment I clicked request consultation, I knew there was no turning back. But the confirmation email didn't bring the sense of victory I thought it would. It was quiet, sterile, just a few lines of text thanking me for my submission. The words looked small on the screen, almost unremarkable, but they felt heavier than anything I'd ever sent in my life. 2 days passed. Monday came, pulling me back into the rhythm of the ordinary. Emails, phone calls, deadlines. I worked as an administrative coordinator at a local architecture firm, the kind of job where you keep everything running but rarely get noticed for it. Maybe that was why I'd lasted there so long. Staying invisible had always been my safest skill. The morning light streamed through the office blinds, drawing thin gold lines across my desk. My coffee was already cold. I had a pile of invoices waiting to be approved, but I couldn't stop glancing at the folder labeled freedomplan_Amelia.pdf on my desktop. The name itself steadied me. Freedom wasn't something I'd ever dared to plan for. At noon, I slipped away from the chatter of the break room and sat alone at my desk. I reread the bank's release form instructions, slowly, carefully, like studying for an exam that could change everything. My pen tapped against the table. I had until the end of the month to file the removal request officially, but something inside me said I needed to take one more step before then. It was time to make it known. That evening, when I got home, I made tea instead of wine. The apartment smelled faintly of mint and printer ink. I sat down at my kitchen table, opened my laptop, and created a new email. The blank page waited, almost daring me to hesitate. To Mom, Seraphine. Subject, regarding financial responsibilities. I read the words several times before typing the rest. My fingers trembled only once. Dear Mom and Seraphine, after reviewing my financial obligations, I've decided to request removal from the joint car and mortgage loans I co-signed. Beginning next month, I will no longer be contributing to payments related to these accounts. This is not an emotional decision. It's a financial one. I've supported our family for years, and I no longer have the means, or the will, to continue doing so under these terms. I appreciate your understanding. Amelia. No emojis. No apologies. No explanations. Just truth. I reread it once, twice. It sounded colder than I expected, but maybe that was good. Warmth had never protected me before. When I hit send, I exhaled, slowly, like something long stuck in my chest had finally moved. The message disappeared into the void, replaced by the small, impersonal words, "Message sent." For a moment, I just sat there. My hands rested flat on the table, the faint hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. I thought about all the times I'd said yes when I wanted to say no, all the times family had meant obligation. I didn't owe anyone that anymore. The next hour passed quietly. I folded laundry, washed a few dishes, checked my work calendar for the next day. The world didn't explode. My phone didn't ring. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Then the notification came. Family chat, new message. I shouldn't have looked. I should have turned off the phone, gone to bed, protected the small calm I'd built. But curiosity always wins before wisdom does. The message was from Seraphine. It wasn't words, it was a meme. A cartoon piggy bank shattering into pieces, coins flying everywhere. The caption read, "When the favorite finally snapped skull." I froze. My finger hovered over the screen. Beneath it, Mom replied, "We raised her better than this." And then, like a silent exclamation mark, Dad reacted with a thumbs up. The chat went quiet after that, but the damage was done. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. That old familiar doubt crept in. Maybe I was being too harsh. Maybe I was overreacting. But then I remember the cake splattered across the deck, the laughter echoing through the night, the frosting staining my shoes. That wasn't love. That was permission for cruelty. I set the phone down and hit mute chat. The small gray bell icon appeared beside it, mercifully quiet. I leaned back in my chair and let the silence return. Outside, the city lights glowed through my curtains, small pinpricks of gold against a dark sky. It felt strange to be alone and not feel lonely. For the first time, solitude wasn't punishment, it was protection. I went to my bedroom, pulled out my old leather journal from the nightstand, and opened to a blank page. The paper smelled faintly of dust and time. I hadn't written in it since my 20s, back when I still believed journaling could fix me. The pen hesitated before moving. "My boundary is not betrayal," I wrote. The words looked awkward at first, too formal, too intentional, but the more I read them, the truer they became. I wrote it again, underlining the last two words. Betrayal. That's what they'd call it, I knew. They always did when I refused to play my role. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I closed the journal, slid it back into the drawer, and returned to my desk. I opened the folder labeled freedomplan_amelia.pdf and added one last document to it, the email I just sent. Then I created a backup, a USB drive I labeled with one word, proof. I locked it in the small fire-safe box under my bed. It wasn't about money anymore. It was about evidence, about boundaries, about finally leaving a paper trail that told my side of a story. The clock read 10:47 p.m. I hadn't eaten dinner, but I wasn't hungry. The air in the apartment was still cool. I closed my laptop and stared at the dim reflection of my face in the screen. "They've been warned," I whispered. The sound of my own voice startled me. It wasn't angry or frightened, it was steady. 4 years, I'd been the quiet one, the peacemaker, the one who made sure everyone else felt comfortable, even at my expense. But peace built on silence isn't peace at all, it's surrender. I stood, turned off the lights, and walked to the window. Outside, the moon hung low over the city, pale and unassuming, like a witness too tired to intervene. Somewhere, I imagined Seraphine laughing at her own joke, Mom shaking her head, Dad pretending not to notice. But they would notice soon enough. I pressed my palm against the glass, feeling the faint coolness of it, and let my thoughts settle like dust after a storm. The hardest part wasn't sending the message. It was accepting that I might lose them for good. And yet, as I stood there, I realized something simple but powerful. Losing people who treat your pain as entertainment isn't loss. It's liberation. I turned from the window and crawled into bed, letting the quiet swallow me whole. But warnings mean little to people who think you'll never walk away. But warnings mean little to people who think you'll never walk away. That thought carried me through the next day like a quiet drumbeat beneath my ribs. It was strange how normal the world seemed when your whole life was in quiet rebellion. Emails still came in, coffee still brewed, traffic still honked at red lights. Yet beneath that normalcy, something inside me had shifted. By the following morning, Santa Barbara's sky was washed with early light, and the ocean breeze filtered through downtown. I parked in the usual spot near Green Pulse Tech, where I worked as operations manager. My badge clicked at the door, the glass lobby gleaming with its usual calm professionalism. To everyone else, it was just another Tuesday. But to me, it felt like the first day I'd stopped apologizing for existing. I greeted the receptionist, checked my inbox, and dove into the 9 a.m. team meeting. There was a sense of focus I hadn't felt in months. My colleagues noticed. "You look different today," one of them said with a half smile. "Like you actually slept." I laughed softly. Maybe I finally did. The morning rolled smoothly until late afternoon, when the front desk pinged my work chat. "You have a visitor. Says she's family." I froze. My first thought was Mom, maybe coming to talk things out. But no, Mom wouldn't drive all the way downtown. She'd call first, guilt first, lecture second. That left one option. I typed back, "Please tell her I'm in a meeting." The receptionist replied, "She insists. Says it's important." Before I could respond, I heard her voice echoing down the hall, high, dramatic and unmistakable. "Amelia, there you are. Wow, fancy place you got here." "Seraphine." I looked up to see her sweeping into the lobby like she owned it, heels clicking against the tile, perfume clouding the air, sunglasses perched on her head despite being indoors. Every eye in the room turned toward her. I rose from my chair, pulse tightening. "Seraphine, this isn't the time or place." "Oh, come on," she said loudly, flashing that bright, hollow smile she saved for public scenes. "Can I visit my little sister? Or should I say the family banker?" A ripple of awkward laughter spread across the front office. She leaned against the reception desk, pretending to inspect the decor. "Your coworkers know you're abandoning Mom, right?" she added, her voice syrupy sweet but sharp underneath. "She's been so upset since your email." "I mean, who sent something like that? You couldn't just call like a normal person." I felt the room shift. My coworkers exchanged glances, unsure if they should step in or pretend to work harder. I could feel the heat rising in my chest, that familiar tightening that usually meant I'd say nothing and swallow the moment whole. But not today. I stood slowly, pushing my chair back, my movements deliberate. "Seraphine," I said, calm and even, "you need to leave." Her mouth curled. "Or what? You'll send another one of your passive-aggressive emails?" "Dear family, I'm done being generous. You've always been so dramatic, Amelia. Poor little martyr act getting old." A few of my coworkers were now openly staring. Someone whispered, "Is that her sister?" The receptionist shifted uncomfortably behind her desk. I walked closer, each step grounding me. "This isn't our house," I said quietly, just loud enough for the room to hear. "You don't get a storm in here like you do everywhere else." She smirked, ready to snap back, but I didn't let her. "This is my workplace," I continued, voice steady as a blade. "My life. My space. And you are not invited." The silence that followed was absolute. Seraphine blinked, caught off guard by the lack of volume, the calm precision of my words. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Her confidence faltered. A moment later, my colleague David stepped forward, polite but firm. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises." Her eyes flashed. "Don't call me ma'am. I'm just here to—" "Now," he said, in the same tone he used with difficult clients. The receptionist buzzed the door open. For a heartbeat, I thought she'd resist, make one final scene. But she turned sharply, muttering something under her breath, and strutted out, her heels echoing across the tile. The glass door shut behind her with a hiss of finality. My hands were trembling, but not from fear. From adrenaline. From finally standing my ground. "Wow," one of my coworkers whispered after a long moment. "That was impressive." I forced a small smile. "Family stuff," I said quietly. "Sorry for the disruption." No one asked more. They didn't need to. When I sat back down, the office manager leaned over from the next desk, her tone low. "If anyone did that to me in public, I'd have lost it. You handled that with dignity." I looked down at my hands, still shaking slightly. "Thanks," I said softly. Later that afternoon, as I packed up my things, I noticed an unread email from my boss. The subject line read, "Well done today." I opened it. "Amelia, I witnessed what happened in the lobby. You handled it with professionalism and composure. I know that wasn't easy. Consider this a note of appreciation." I stared at the screen for a long time before closing my laptop. By the time I got home, the sun was setting, spilling a soft orange glow over my balcony. The city below buzzed quietly with life, cars passing, dogs barking, someone's wind chime catching the breeze. I poured myself a glass of water, sat outside, and let the quiet settle in. I unlocked my phone, opened the family chat, and hovered my thumb over the name. 4 years. That chat had been a digital leash, daily reminders of guilt, mockery, and forced obligation. Then, with one tap, I deleted it. Gone. The silence afterward felt enormous, a freedom too vast to name. I opened my text messages and typed to my therapist. Today, I didn't freeze. I answered. Her reply came quickly. That's progress, Amelia. That's healing in motion. I smiled faintly and set the phone down. For a long time, I just sat there, watching the sky shift from orange to violet to deep blue. I thought about every moment I'd stayed quiet, every apology I'd made to keep peace that never really existed. Those days were done. When I finally stood, the city lights shimmered below like scattered promises. I whispered into the fading light, the lines drawn. That night, sleep came easily for the first time in months. But peace, I was learning, is never left alone for long. The next morning, my alarm buzzed softly at 7. I rolled over, stretching, feeling a strange lightness that almost frightened me. Then my phone vibrated again, a different sound. A notification from Green First Bank. Loan overdue notice, co-signed account. The air seemed to tighten around me. I opened the message slowly, my stomach sinking as the details appeared. The payment, Seraphine's payment, was missed. Of course it was. I stared at the glowing screen until it blurred. Outside, the world carried on. Seagulls calling over the coast, neighbors starting their cars, the hum of another ordinary morning. But inside me, I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. And Seraphine had no intention of letting Amelia go that easy. The notice lit up my phone like a warning light. It wasn't just any message. Green First Bank, overdue balance. 45 days, co-signed loan in default. I stared at the screen until the numbers blurred. I'd helped my sister, I'd helped my mother, and now those very hands were being used, without my knowledge, to pull down my future. The faint hum of the countertop espresso machine in my apartment cut through the silence. Outside, early afternoon summer light spilled into my kitchen. I poured a cup with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. I'd packed breakfast at my desk, responded to emails, my office persona intact, but inside the calm facade cracked. By 6 p.m., I was driving the usual route toward my mother's house, the one we used to call home, Valora's house in a quiet Santa Barbara neighborhood. The streetlights flickered on one by one as dusk approached. In the passenger seat sat a printed copy of the bank notice and another file I'd pulled from my laptop. Transfers, statements, faded receipts. Everything documented. It felt like armor. Mom greeted me in the garden, trowel in hand, planting petunias in a terracotta pot. The smells of soil and summer evening were almost comforting, but not enough to soften what I had to say. I stepped onto the patio, set the files on a small wrought iron table. Mom, we need to talk, I began. She looked up, wiped dirt from her fingers. Hey, sweetheart, come help me finish the flowers. I didn't sit. Instead, I crossed my arms. You know why I'm here. She smiled, too bright. Amelia, you made a scene last week. All this drama. It's not drama when your name is on the loan, your payment's defaulting, and you don't mention it. I lifted the notice. The bank says I'm legally responsible because I signed it. Her smile faltered. You're overreacting. It's just money. My breath stuck in my throat. There it was, that familiar dismissal. You raised me to sacrifice, I whispered. But never to be sacrificed. Mom's posture changed. Her shoulders squared. Don't threaten us, Amelia. You'll regret it. Her voice was quiet, but the words held weight. The kind of weight built when someone's used to giving orders. I didn't respond. I backed away, gathered the files, and walked toward my car. I locked eyes with her one last time. This wasn't motherhood anymore. It was power masked as love. That evening, I sat at my kitchen table, the files spread out like evidence, coffee gone cold. I found the number on the bank's website for liability removal. My finger hovered over the request consultation link. I remember the visit to her house, the soil under my mother's nails, the smile that wasn't meant to comfort. And something inside me snapped, not in a shout, but in a quiet decision. I dialed the line. A calm voice answered. Green First Bank, Devin Diaz speaking. Mr. Diaz, my name is Amelia Carlisle. I'm calling about a co-signed car loan and possible release of liability. He said, please send scanned documents, the original loan, proof of payment history, cosigner removal form. We'll review. After I hung up, I printed the forms, filled them out, scanned the originals, uploaded them to the bank portal. My heart pounded as each page sent. It felt like dismantling part of a house I'd built for decades. As I refreshed my email inbox, a message arrived. Submission received. Our review will begin within 10 business days. My lips curved, not into a smile, but a thin line of resolve. This ends now, I whispered into the dark room. In the early hours, I didn't sleep. The moon cast silver across the walls, and I thought about every time they said I owed them. Every time I picked up the pieces. Every time I was called too sensitive. My sensitivity saved me more times than I care to admit. The next morning, I saw the notification while brushing my teeth. My mother had posted something on social media. Some daughters forget who pay their bills. The words hammered into me. I stared at the screen until the cold water splashed my face. I realized then that the story I had believed all my life, of family, sacrifice, duty, was a story told by others to keep me in the background. I closed the app. I didn't respond. But I stood up. And I meant it. The post had over 40 comments before I even knew what was going on. I was at my desk when I swiped open my phone and froze. My mother's public message stared back at me on my screen. We gave her everything. She gave us betrayal. Under it, my sister's comment. Ungrateful little brat. The words spread through the thread like wildfire. Neighbors, old friends from church, coworkers, everyone weighed in with their version of the truth. I sat in my quiet apartment that evening and watched the world move with none of its attention on me, though I felt more exposed than ever. The evening sky had turned shades of pink and lilac, and the balcony door stood ajar, just a breeze away from calm. But I couldn't catch it. A buzzing in my ear, the sort that implies danger in daylight. It started with the message. Then came the knock. A deep, steady pounding at the front door, sharp enough to echo. I looked through the peephole and saw them, Mom in her Sunday best, the smile too wide, Seraphine swaggering beside her, like a rule enforcer. Their faces were twisted in anger, one hand on the door handle, one foot poised in. You destroyed us, Belora shouted through the door, voice raised enough for neighbors to hear. You'll fix this, or we'll make you pay. My heart pounded, not from fear but from recognition. I had crossed a line they'd never allowed me to cross. I hit record on my phone, set it beside the door on a low table. You're trespassing, I said, voice calm. I warned you once. This is twice. There was a flash of surprise on their faces. They'd expected me to shrink, hide, apologize. Instead, I stood my ground. Mother said, You're making this personal. I replied, It's always been personal. I just didn't notice until now. Seraphine sneered. You'll regret waking up one day and realizing you burned your family down. I held the camera steady. The family you built was on my back. I clicked voice memo, 911. I need to report harassment at 540 Elm Street. Within minutes the door swung open and 2 officers in blue uniforms entered quietly. The night sound seemed distant after this. Cars passing, distant music, the hum of building life. Inside, their voices were so deliberate it felt surreal. Miss Carlisle, one officer said, flipping through his pad. Did you express that you want no further contact? I nodded. Yes, sir. I want no contact until further notice. The other officer turned to Belora. Are you aware that repeated unwanted visits constitute harassment? She swallowed. She's our daughter. The first officer cut in. She's an adult. And she said no. Silence sank over the room like a final curtain. That night, I didn't lie in bed trying to make sense of it. I drank herbal tea, lounged on the balcony, and watched the lights flicker in the city. I felt neither triumphant nor heavy, just oddly peaceful. I was no longer hiding. I was simply existing. In the morning I opened my inbox. Subject line, notice of social media defamation inquiry. I leaned back and closed my eyes. This wasn't mercy. It was momentum. And then the email arrived. I had just settled at my kitchen table, the TV humming in the background, when the subject line glowed on my phone screen. Urgent, regarding Amelia Carlisle. My palms tightened around the mug of chamomile tea I'd poured to calm my nerves. I pressed the couch cushions and let the city lights blur outside the window. The earlier nights, petunias on Mom's lawn, the stinging Facebook post, the door I locked behind me, had led here. Now the workplace felt the fault line shifting beneath it. At Green Pulse Tech, downtown, I arrived to the same lobby I'd grown used to, but its polish felt brittle. My badge scanned, my name announced, yet I sensed every eye that briefly flickered my way. I sat in my usual spot behind my monitor, the sunlight tracing angles across the open floor plan. I tried focusing on the quarterly numbers for our new satellite design project, but the ping from my computer distracted me. A calendar invite, meeting with HR and supervisor, scheduled for 3 o'clock. My heart began to drum. 3 o'clock approached too quickly. I stood, collected my notes, and walked into the conference room, doors sliding shut with a soft whoosh behind me. My supervisor, Lydia, sat at the head of a table with 2 HR representatives. Their faces were polite, professional, but something in their eyes told me this meeting wasn't about the satellite project. Amelia, Lydia said, voice low but firm, we received a disturbing email this morning from your mother. Time slowed. My fingers unclasped from around my coffee mug. I read aloud in my mind the line, financial coercion, exploitation, mental instability. She continued, your employment is under formal review. We're placing you on temporary leave while we investigate. A cool wave of shock flooded me. I stood there, balancing between indignation and the fear of being dismissed. I started, but words defected. They handed me documents, a copy of the email, allegations, company policy pages. I sat down sharply. The conference room felt like a holding cell. Once dismissed, I scanned the email copy. My mother accusing me of elder abuse, of siphoning funds, of taking advantage of family. I glanced at the statement again. I felt isolated, humiliated, but anger flickered too, sharp and bright. On the drive home, the Pacific breeze didn't calm me. It charged me. The usual route by the bluff looked the same, surf crashing, palm fronds stirring, but I saw it differently now. My reflection in the rearview mirror held no apologies. I had been on the defensive for so long, now I chose offense. That night at a local coffee shop, I sat with my laptop open. I logged into the bank portal and contacted Mr. Diaz. He responded within the hour, please submit documentation for review. I gathered everything. Voice recordings of Mom's threats, loan papers with my signature below Seraphine's, email threads where favors became expectations, a Venmo request plainly labeled SUV cosign mail signed it. My fingers moved quickly. Upload, save, encrypt. I felt clarity forming. This wasn't about anger. It was about reclaiming the narrative. I shot a short video using my phone. Soft lighting, simple background. I said, I was the youngest daughter. I helped them all. Until I said no, my voice cracked only once. Then I paused, steadied it, and added, this isn't revenge. This is recovery. I hit upload. I watched the progress bar climb. It felt like a door click open inside me. By midnight I lay awake, the city quiet except for distant sirens and the hum of traffic. My phone buzzed with notifications, Reddit threads, YouTube comments, LinkedIn posts sharing the video. View counts rose. Comments poured in. We've lived this. Please keep going. This family gaslit her. That recording, chilling. My inbox pinged. Local news outlet wants to interview you. In the twilight of my bedroom, I didn't celebrate. I simply sat upright, absorbing the shift. The narrative was no longer theirs alone. The next morning, I opened my email from HR, subject line, well done yesterday. My boss's message, you didn't just survive, you stood tall. My eyes blurred. Relief, yes, but something deeper, validation. I dressed for work and walked the hallway of Green Pulse Tech with quiet pride. Coworkers nodded. No whispers. Just acknowledgement. For years I faded into the background. Now I walked forward. That evening, I received a text from an unknown number. We're not done. You'll regret this. Uff. I stared at my phone and smiled faintly. Regret might have once kept me quiet, but it didn't scare me now. I set the phone down. The skyline outside the balcony glowed with possibility. I leaned back, breathed deeply. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the soft clicking of a file uploaded, the steady beat of truth. Peace was edging close. I watched the skyline from the ferry as we pulled away from the dock, a ripple of water glinting in early morning light. The air in Seattle was crisp, salt-tainted, full of possibility. I clutched my travel mug, not because I needed warmth, but because the moment felt so delicate. 3 weeks since my video went viral, and now the horizon looked different. I wasn't just leaving a city. I was stepping away from an identity that had once been made for me. I had arrived in Seattle for a corporate conference with Green Pulse Tech, where I had been promoted to lead a wellness initiative. The move was one sign that the scales were shifting. But this morning I was here because I needed a fresh set of surroundings. The story wasn't over yet, but I was done hiding. When I checked my phone on board, the notification list startled me. Vehicle repossessed. Neighborhood association vote. Class action filing launched. Seraphine's public persona fluttered into nothing as thread by thread, her support network unraveled. Her SUV, the one I'd helped co-sign, was gone. She posted a smiley selfie with the caption, "New Beginnings," but the comments told a different story. Pay your debt first. Family finances are not a game. Mom's Facebook page had fewer friends. She'd been removed from the association board in a local HOA vote. I registered none of this with triumph. It wasn't about schadenfreude. It was the consequence of choices laid bare. The ferry came alongside the dock. I stepped onto solid ground, inhaled deeply. The city's rhythm felt steady, not frantic as it had months ago. My job at Green Pulse gave me a new title, new colleagues who didn't know my history, only the work I produced. I hung my badge as Director of Employee Wellness and Advocacy. A title earned, not inherited. During the panel discussion later that day, I listened more than I spoke. But in the networking break, I found a younger woman standing alone by the coffee station. She looked exhausted, drained. "Iu faratabarum, Mamelia." She introduced herself. "Jess, I'm stuck between taking care of my tax help business and supporting my family." Jess told me she felt trapped by guilt. I nodded. I used to be in the same place. I shared a glimpse of my story, not the cake, not the broken promises, but the part where I decided this ends now. She leaned in. "Thank you for saying that." For me, it wasn't about being thanked, it was about truth given. I realized I wasn't just living for survival, I was living for freedom. Later, back in my hotel room, I pulled out a journal I'd recommitted to writing. I scribbled, "Forgiveness isn't letting them in. It's letting me out." I paused as the words settled. The wristwatch ticking beside the lamp sounded loud in the quiet room. I closed the journal, looked out the window at the rain beginning to mist against the glass. Seattle's weather had a way of cleaning itself slowly. Something about it suited this moment. The next morning, I stood in Lydia's office, my supervisor's cheerful smile now replaced by sincere warmth. "You've taken on the wellness initiative wonderfully," she said. "I'd like you to mentor Jess." My heart pumped. The run-in with Seraphine had cost me some nights, but this was the payoff. I accepted. Even though my apartment back in Santa Barbara was still under my name, I decided to move north at the end of the year. The idea of sunlight through windows no longer felt strange. It felt like home. A week later, I returned to my apartment for one last time. I opened a letter from Dad. He'd flown in quietly, seen the news, visited the site where the yard used to be. The letter said, "I saw the video. I don't know what's right anymore. But I know I wasn't brave like you." I didn't reply. I placed the letter next to the documents that had freed me, loan release requests, legal submissions, emails of support. I framed them together. The photograph of me and him when I was 8, still in the same frame, stood between them. Something about it made sense. The truth, the forgiveness, the release all lived there. On a late Sunday afternoon, I walked along the waterfront pier, coffee in hand. The sun broke through clouds as if it was an apology built for me. I let the breeze wash over my cheeks. Behind me lay the creak of injustice, the echo of mocking laughter, the ache of being invisible. Ahead, the skyline stretched new and bright, buildings reaching up, windows shimmering, a future I was ready to walk into. I stopped, took a deep breath, and whispered to myself, "No more silence." And maybe, for the first time ever, I realized there was no next chapter to fear, only ones I could write. Sometimes, the people who hurt us the most are the ones who share our last name. But strength doesn't always roar. It often whispers in boundaries, in silence, in walking away. Amelia's story isn't just about revenge. It's about reclaiming dignity from those who mistake kindness for weakness. Have you ever had to choose peace over family? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your story. And if this moved you, don't forget to subscribe.